You know, over the years, I've come to believe something that might sound simple on the surface, but runs deep, deeper than most people are willing to look. It's this: a person's true nature isn't hidden behind grand speeches or well-polished manners. No, it's not in the words they say when all eyes are on them. It shows itself in the quiet moments, the little reactions, the way they treat others when they think no one's paying attention. And the older I get, the more I see, really see, how clear that truth becomes. We spend a lifetime learning how to read people. We watch how they treat their friends, how they show love, how they carry themselves when things are going well. But the real test, the real revelation, happens in very different circumstances. It's not when life is smooth and easy. It's when the road gets bumpy, when time is short, or when someone can't offer anything in return. So today, I want to talk to you about something that might change how you look at the people around you, and maybe even how you see yourself. If you want to truly understand someone, not just what they show on the outside, but who they are deep down, there are 3 simple things to pay attention to. And when I say simple, I mean it. These aren't complicated ideas, but they're powerful. They cut through the noise, through the masks people wear. And they speak to the heart of character, especially when everything else fades away. Now, I'm not here to preach. I'm just going to talk to you like I would to an old friend, over a cup of tea, maybe sitting on a quiet porch as the sun sets behind the trees. Let's start with the first of those 3 things, because once you notice it, you'll never unsee it. Watch how a person treats someone who can do absolutely nothing for them. This one is a mirror. A clean one? You see, when there's something to gain, money, status, praise, it's easy to act kind, to say the right words, to wear the right smile. But how someone treats a waiter, a janitor, a stranger on the street, or even a child who just needs a moment of attention, that's where the truth slips out. I remember seeing a man, maybe in his 40s, sharply dressed, sitting at a small cafe. He was polite enough to the waiter when he ordered, but the moment his coffee came out lukewarm, his entire tone changed. His voice got sharp, his patience disappeared, and the waiter, an older gentleman, suddenly became invisible to him. Just someone to scold, not a human being with a story, with sore feet, or with a name. And then, just 2 tables over, a young woman spilled her drink while helping her toddler. Her hands were full, trying to calm her child, trying not to cry from the embarrassment. That same older waiter came to help her. But the real beauty? It came from an elderly man sitting near her, probably in his 70s. He got up, offered her a tissue, held her glass steady while she got things in order, and gave her the kindest smile I'd seen in weeks. Didn't know her, didn't need to help. But he did. There's a kind of dignity in quiet kindness. And those moments, small as they are, tell you everything you need to know. That man didn't need recognition. He wasn't proving anything. He was just being decent. The world doesn't reward that kind of behavior loudly. But character isn't built for applause. It's something we carry like an invisible coat. It keeps us warm, even when no one else notices. And this lesson, this first truth, it matters even more as we get older. Because we've seen enough people come and go. We've watched some rise high, only to show their ugliness when power tilted in their favor. And we've seen others, quieter ones, walk through life with gentle strength, lifting others without making a sound. Now, let me take you to another place where character gets revealed. It's not about what a person says in comfort. It's about what they say when they're angry. Ah, yes, anger. That fire that flares up and burns through the masks. You want to see the real edges of someone's heart? Watch them when they're mad. Watch the words they use, the way they talk to people they love when frustration boils over. Do they slam, blame, belittle? Or do they pause, try to cool down, maybe even walk away so they don't say something they'll regret? I've known folks who could be saints on a sunny day, sweet as honey, charming as can be. But once something didn't go their way, they'd turn mean. Not just upset, mean. Throwing around sharp words like knives, cutting deep, even at people who'd done nothing wrong. And later, no apology. just silence, as if their anger gave them permission to wound and move on. But I've also seen people who hurt and then paused, who were honest enough to say, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that." That takes strength, more strength than most people think, because it's easy to act like anger justifies everything. But it doesn't. It reveals what's lurking inside. Think about the times you've been on the receiving end of that kind of temper, how it made you feel. Maybe you still carry some of those moments like bruises that never quite healed. And think, too, about the times you've been angry, the things you said and maybe wish you could take back. We're human, all of us. But character isn't about never getting mad. It's about how we handle it, how we come back from it, whether we use our fire to burn bridges or light the way forward. And that leads us into something else, something quieter, but just as telling. Pay attention to how a person behaves when no one's watching. That's where the masks come off. When there's no audience, no applause, no one to impress, that's when a person's soul stretches its legs and reveals its real shape. Some people are generous only when the cameras are on. They'll help when others are looking, when there's praise waiting at the end. But take the spotlight away, and the helping hand disappears. The smile fades. The kindness dries up. But others, they give in silence. They clean up the park after a picnic. They call an old neighbor just to check in. They leave groceries at someone's door with no note, no name. They do what's right even when it costs them time, energy, comfort, because it's simply who they are. I think we all reach a point in life where we care less about appearances and more about essence. We stop being impressed by performances. We stop chasing applause, and we start listening to the quiet truths that always speak loudest in silence. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of those silent gestures, you know what I'm talking about. The moment someone made you feel seen or loved or supported without making a show of it. It stays with you, doesn't it? It's these things, how a person treats someone with no power, how they handle their anger, and what they do when no one's watching, that build the foundation of true character. And once you learn to look for them, you'll never be fooled by surface charm again. We've all known people who were great at pretending, smiles that felt just a bit too stiff, compliments that came with a shadow of calculation, promises made with fingers crossed behind their back. But these three moments, they don't lie. They don't need to shout. They just are. So if you're wondering whether someone in your life is truly trustworthy, or if you're trying to be more honest with yourself about who you are becoming, start by noticing those small moments. You'll find more truth in them than in 100 fancy speeches. And that's where we'll pause for now. We've started to unwrap something important here, something that reaches into the heart of how we relate to each other, especially as we move through the later chapters of our lives. Because what matters now isn't how loud someone talks, but how deeply they live. There's something about growing older that sharpens your ability to see what really matters. You've likely found this yourself. Things that once seemed important start to lose their shine, while other quieter truths rise to the surface. And among those truths is this: character is not loud. It doesn't wave its arms for attention. It's steady. It's patient. It shows up in the way someone lives, especially when life doesn't go according to plan. And that brings us to another moment when true character steps out from behind the curtain. How someone acts when they have power over another person. Power doesn't just mean being someone's boss or having money in the bank. It can be subtle. It can show up in a family when one person is relied on more than the others. Or in friendships, when one voice always gets the final say. Or even in a simple favor, when someone knows you need help and they hold it over your head like a trophy. The way someone handles those moments says a lot. Do they become gentle? Do they use their position to lift others up, to share, to guide without crushing? Or do they lean into it, remind you of it, expect something in return for their so-called generosity? I once knew a woman in her 60s. Her name was Margaret. She had a daughter who'd fallen on hard times, moved back in with her for a while. Margaret helped, cooked meals, watched the grandkids, kept the house running, but she never once made her daughter feel like a burden. Not once did she bring it up as leverage. "That's what love does," she told me. "It gives quietly." Contrast that with another man I knew, Walter. He lent his brother some money during a difficult stretch, and for years he brought it up in every conversation. "Remember that time I bailed you out?" Even at family dinners he'd mention it, just loud enough. It wasn't about helping, it was about control. His help came with a chain attached, and you could feel it. Power reveals, not in big gestures, but in the way someone holds it, like a tool or a weapon. Now, as we age, many of us begin to lose certain kinds of power. Maybe our job title is gone, maybe we've downsized, or don't move as quickly as we used to. But you'll notice something beautiful about people of real character. They don't need those things to feel worthy. Their strength doesn't depend on being above anyone. In fact, they often grow softer, more humble, more generous. It's the ones who were never truly grounded that scramble to feel superior. They talk louder, boast more, remind everyone of what they used to be. And all of that noise? It's fear, the fear of being small. But the truth is, the strongest people are often the quietest in the room. That brings us to another revealing space, how someone handles discomfort, whether physical, emotional, or even social. Because when a person is in pain, tired, sick, embarrassed, out of their depth, something slips. The practiced version of themselves can't hold as tightly. You begin to see what's underneath. I remember sitting in a hospital waiting room once. A man across from me was clearly in pain. He shifted constantly in his seat, winced every few minutes. His wife, a frail woman with soft eyes, offered him her coat to rest his back. He snapped at her, "I don't need that," then turned away. She flinched, folded the coat back in her lap, and said nothing. Now I understand pain. Pain makes people short-tempered. It can make you feel vulnerable, raw, but even in those moments, some people still manage to stay gentle. I've seen it. I've felt it. A person hurting can still say thank you, can still reach out and squeeze your hand, can still apologize if they've snapped. That's the kind of grace that goes beyond manners. It's who they are at their core. And you'll notice it too, especially among people who've been through hardship, the ones who've known real loss, real struggle. Many of them come out the other side more tender, not harder. They've learned that life doesn't owe us ease. They've stopped trying to impress. They show up with open hands, not closed fists. And in those moments, you begin to recognize something else. That character isn't just how we treat others. It's how we treat ourselves when no one's cheering us on. Some people speak to themselves with such cruelty. They make a mistake, and the voices start, "I'm so stupid. I always ruin things." You'd never say those things to a friend, and yet some of us carry that tone inside our heads all day long. But then there are those who've learned a different way. They're not perfect, they mess up, but they say things like, "That was hard, but I'll get through it." Or, "I didn't do my best today, but I'll try again tomorrow." That inner voice, that's part of character too. Because if you've ever loved someone who was hard on themselves, you know how painful that can be. You want to reach in and shake the kindness back into them. And sometimes, being a good person also means being good to yourself. Not in a loud, self-congratulatory way, but in a quiet, respectful one. Now, as we grow older, many of us spend more time reflecting than reacting. We think back on our lives, our choices, our mistakes, the things we wish we'd said or done differently. And in that space, something remarkable happens. We begin to see clearly, not just others, but ourselves. And if we're willing, we can soften, we can grow. We can still choose character over pride. I've seen it with my own eyes. A man in his 70s finally reaching out to a brother he hadn't spoken to in over 30 years. A woman in her 80s writing letters to her grandchildren to say, "I wish I had been more present when you were little, but I love you with all my heart now." These aren't grand gestures meant for applause. They're quiet, sacred moments of truth. and they come from people who've done the hard work of turning inward. And maybe that's the final thing I want to leave you with for now. That seeing someone's character isn't about catching them in a perfect moment. It's about noticing how they carry their imperfections. Do they own them? Do they try to be better, even just a little? Do they care enough to apologize, to grow, to reflect? Perfection is a mask, but sincerity, humility, and compassion, those are the fingerprints of real character. And you'll find them not in people who claim to be good, but in those who quietly try to do good, day after day. And when you start looking through that lens, when you start paying attention to how people treat those who are weaker, how they act when they're angry or embarrassed, how they hold power or ask for help, you start to see the world differently. You start to feel who's real and who's just performing. And you begin to gather the kind of people around you who bring peace, not chaos. Kindness, not calculation. Depth, not noise. That kind of clarity, it's one of the gifts of aging. You don't fall for charm alone, you trust your gut. You feel the truth in someone's presence, not just their words. And once you've seen it, really seen it, you can't go back to shallow waters. There's a certain peace that comes with time, not just the passing of years, but the lived-in kind of time, the one that fills your hands with memories, your face with lines, and your heart with understanding. And one of the quiet joys of that peace is that you no longer need to be impressed. You just want realness, depth, people who are solid, even when life isn't. But here's the thing many still miss. Character doesn't just show in dramatic moments. Sometimes it's revealed most clearly in how someone treats the rhythm of ordinary life. Think about someone waiting in a long line at the pharmacy, or stuck behind a slow driver on a rainy afternoon, or sitting across from someone who talks too much and listens too little. Those little moments of tension, where patience is tested, where control slips just a little, they uncover more about a person's soul than a polished speech ever will. I once stood behind a man in a grocery store who'd forgotten his wallet. He was older, embarrassed, fumbling in his coat pocket as the line grew behind him. A few people shifted impatiently, exhaled loudly, even rolled their eyes. But one woman, maybe in her early 70s, stepped up quietly. She put her hand on his shoulder and said, "Take your time, dear. We've all been there." And with no drama at all, she paid for his milk and bread. Didn't expect thanks, just kindness, offered like it was the most natural thing in the world. And that's the kind of character that doesn't shout, it whispers. It lives in those quiet, ordinary gestures that most overlook. Now let's look at something even more subtle, something you won't notice unless you slow down enough to see it. How a person speaks about others when they're not in the room. That right there, that's one of the truest windows into someone's character. See, anyone can act polite to your face, but what do they say when you're not listening? Do they protect your name, or do they toss it around like cheap currency? Do they speak with respect, or do they sprinkle their words with mockery and judgment just to feel taller themselves? There's an old saying, what you say about others says more about you than it does about them. And it's true. The person who constantly criticizes, who gossips, who always has something sour to say, what they're really showing is their own emptiness. I've seen people who made themselves feel important by tearing others down, spreading half-truths, stirring small conflicts, always needing someone to be less so they could feel more. But I've also seen the opposite. I've seen quiet people who, even in the absence of others, choose to speak gently about them. Even when they could complain, they choose understanding. Even when hurt, they don't retaliate. That takes strength, not weakness. Strength of character. And when you think about the people you trust most, aren't they often the ones you know would defend you, even when you're not around? That kind of loyalty. It's rare. But once you find it, it's worth everything. Now, that brings us to something that many overlook, especially as we get older. How someone handles disagreement. Not arguments, not shouting matches, just simple, honest differences in thought. You see, we're living in a world now where people are quicker than ever to divide, to label, to say, if you don't agree with me, then you're wrong, or worse, you're bad. And that kind of thinking, it poisons relationships. But a person with real character, they don't need you to agree with them to respect you. They don't force their views. They listen. They ask. They stay calm, even if your words rub against theirs. Because they know that understanding someone doesn't mean you have to be the same as them. It means you value them enough to share space, even when your thoughts take different paths. I once sat on a park bench next to two older men, probably in their 80s. They were talking politics, very different opinions. You could hear it in their tones. But what struck me wasn't what they said. It was how they said it. One would say, I see your point, but here's what I think. And the other would nod, truly listen, and respond without venom. At the end, one of them laughed and said, well, we're not going to fix the world today, but I'm glad we talked. And then they clinked their coffee cups together like old friends. That is character. The ability to disagree without hatred, to stay soft even when you're passionate, to leave space for someone else's view without feeling threatened by it. Because the truth is, people of deep character don't need everyone to echo them. They don't feel insecure when someone sees the world differently. They're rooted, not rattled. And maybe now, in this season of life, that's one of the most valuable traits we can cultivate. To be the kind of person who listens before reacting, who allows others to feel safe even when they're saying something hard, who doesn't burn bridges just to feel tall for a moment. And let's not forget one more space where character shines, how someone responds to being corrected. Now that's a tough one, isn't it? None of us likes being wrong. It touches something sensitive inside, our pride, our ego, that voice inside that wants to always be right. But watch what happens when someone is gently corrected. Do they open up, say thank you, consider it, or do they stiffen, shut down, blame, deflect? The people I admire most in life aren't the ones who are never wrong. They're the ones who are open to growth, who can say, you know what, you're right, I hadn't seen it that way. That humility, it's gold. It tells you that the person in front of you is still growing, still learning, still becoming better. And isn't that what life is about? Not being flawless, but being willing. We all carry wounds. We all have moments we wish we'd handled better. But character isn't about being spotless. It's about what you do after the stumble. Whether you pretend it didn't happen, or whether you own it, learn from it, and try again. I believe that the deepest form of respect you can offer another person is to stay teachable. Even at 60, even at 70, even at 90, because the moment you think you've got nothing left to learn, that's when the soul starts to stiffen. But as long as we can say, I didn't know that, or I'd like to do better, there's still light in us, still hope, still room to become someone our younger selves would be proud of. And here's something I've noticed again and again. The most graceful people are rarely the loudest. They don't have to prove anything. They're not in a race to look wise or strong or untouchable. They've been through enough to know that character isn't about looking perfect. It's about being real. You'll feel it when you're around them. A quiet steadiness, a gentleness that isn't weak but firm, a kind of moral backbone that doesn't bend just to be liked. And you'll realize with time that those are the people who bring peace into a room, not tension, who make you feel safe, not judged, who hold space for you even when you're messy or unsure or just having a bad day. They're not saints, they're human. But they've made a choice to be the kind of person who lives with integrity even when no one claps for it. And maybe in the end, that's what character truly is. The collection of choices you make in moments that don't seem important. The quiet decisions, the hidden kindnesses, the steady return to what's right even when it's hard. There's something remarkably comforting about knowing who you are, not the version you show to others, not the role you've played in your family or job, but the person you are when no one is watching and you don't feel the need to perform. It's in this quiet knowing that real character roots itself, and the more life you live, the more you start to recognize it in others too. One of the clearest reflections of someone's inner nature I've found is how they carry themselves in moments of loss or disappointment. Not just the grand tragedies, but the subtle, everyday losses, the kind that don't make headlines. When plans fall through, when someone forgets to call, when the world doesn't respond the way they hoped it would. Do they grow bitter? Do they lash out, looking for someone to blame? Or do they pause, take a breath, and choose grace instead? There's a kind of quiet nobility in those who can sit with sadness without making it anyone else's fault. I once knew a woman, Elaine, who lost her husband of nearly 50 years. They were one of those couples you'd see walking hand in hand, even in their 70s, still sharing little jokes and glances. When he passed, her grief was immense. But what stood out wasn't just how she mourned, it was how she kept showing up with kindness. She still baked muffins for the neighbors, still sent birthday cards to her nieces and nephews, still took time to listen when others spoke. Her loss didn't harden her. It deepened her, made her even more tender, more present. She never made her pain anyone else's burden. But if you really asked, she'd open up and share with a kind of strength that wrapped around you like a warm coat. That's what character looks like in grief. Not the absence of pain, but the refusal to let pain turn into cruelty. And this goes hand in hand with how someone treats joy, especially the joy of others. That may sound like a strange thing to say, but just pay attention. Some people shrink in the face of another person's happiness. They feel threatened by it. They try to downplay it or shift the focus back to themselves. But others? They light up with you. They celebrate your small wins like they're their own. They ask questions, cheer you on, genuinely take joy in seeing you happy. That's not just kindness, it's maturity. It takes inner security to be happy for others, especially if your own season of life feels quiet or even lonely. But people of real character know how to hold joy for others even when their own hands feel empty. That's no small thing. That's emotional generosity. And it's rare. I remember a neighbor of mine, George, retired, living alone after his wife passed. Every Sunday, the kids on our street would sell lemonade from a rickety stand. George didn't have grandchildren of his own, but he never missed a Sunday. He'd show up, buy a glass with exact change, and then sit on the curb nearby and chat with them like they were the most important business owners in the world. They lit up when he came, not because he spent $1, but because he saw them, really saw them. And that small, gentle attention, that steady presence, it's one of those hidden gifts that only people of depth know how to offer. And maybe that's another sign of character that's easy to miss unless you're really looking. How someone pays attention. Not in a performative way, not in a look at me being thoughtful kind of way, but in that slow, deliberate noticing. They remember your dog's name. They ask how your mother's doing. They bring you a book they thought you might enjoy. Not because it's a special occasion, but just because they thought of you. That kind of attentiveness, where someone sees beyond the surface, isn't taught. It's grown. It's born from empathy, from a life that's known enough sorrow to value small beauty. These are the people who've learned that you don't need to solve someone's problem to love them well. Sometimes you just need to sit beside them, or listen, or offer a small kindness that says, "You matter to me." And now that I think about it, that might be one of the greatest signs of character of all. The ability to make someone else feel like they matter. Not through grand declarations, but through steady presence. Have you ever had someone speak to you in a way that made you feel like the only person in the room? Someone who listened without checking their watch, who didn't interrupt with stories of their own, who just let you unfold your thoughts without rushing you along. It's rare, but when it happens, it's unforgettable, because most of the time, we're moving too fast, too distracted, too absorbed in our own little worlds. But someone with character, they slow down, they create space. They're not hurried, even if their schedule is full. Because to them, people are not interruptions. They're the point. And we, in our age, know how precious that kind of attention is. We've lived through enough shallow conversations and polite smiles to recognize when someone is truly present. And when we meet someone like that, someone who really shows up fully, it touches something ancient in us, something that says, this is what connection is meant to feel like. You see, character isn't just what you do, it's what you radiate. It's the energy you bring into a room, the way others feel after being with you. Do they feel drained? Or do they feel steadier, warmer, a little more at peace? You can't fake that. Not for long anyway. And the beautiful part is, it doesn't require wealth or titles or perfect health. You don't need a stage or a platform. You don't need to be young or eloquent or bold. All you need is to be anchored, to live with intention, to treat others the way you wish you'd been treated in your most fragile moments. Because that's when character shines brightest, not when things are smooth, but when the wind picks up, when someone disappoints you, when plans fall apart, when you're tired or hurt or scared. What do you choose then? That choice, that's the measure of a person, and it's a choice we can make again and again, even now, especially now. Some might say, I'm too old to change. But I don't believe that for a second. You're not too old. You're just seasoned. And seasoned people, people who've weathered decades of life, know more than anyone that growth doesn't stop unless you decide it does. I've seen men in their 80s learn to soften. I've seen women in their 70s forgive things they thought they'd carry forever. I've seen people with shaky hands and aching knees show more strength in a single word of kindness than a whole room of loud opinions ever could. That's the kind of character that moves the world forward, not through force, but through steadiness, through presence, through being a calm in someone else's storm. And the best part? That kind of character multiplies. When you live it, others feel it. They start to mirror it. Your children, your grandchildren, even strangers you'll never meet again, they carry a piece of it with them. Not because you told them to, but because they saw it in you. So maybe, just maybe, the truest legacy any of us can leave isn't written in stone or on paper. It's written in the way we made people feel, in the quiet integrity we brought into every room, in the love we gave without condition, and the respect we offered without demand. The older I get, the more I realize that true strength rarely makes a sound. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need to prove itself. It's not found in loud declarations or firm handshakes or long resumes. No. Real strength lives quietly, in how a person carries themselves, especially when no one's watching. It reveals itself slowly, like morning light stretching across a quiet room. And if you're paying attention, you'll see it everywhere. We've talked about the way people treat others when there's nothing to gain, the words they choose when they're angry, how they behave when they hold power or when things don't go their way. We've looked at how they speak about others behind closed doors, how they handle correction, disagreement, even disappointment. And each of those moments, small, everyday moments, draws the true outline of someone's character. But now we've come to the quiet question that often lingers, especially as we grow older. What does it all mean for me? Because let's be honest, at this stage of life, we've all made mistakes. We've spoken words we wish we could take back. We've looked the other way when we should have stood up. We've chosen silence when we should have offered comfort. That's just part of being human. But here's what matters now, what we choose going forward. Not in grand gestures, not in trying to fix the past, but in how we show up in the moments still ahead. Because no matter our age, our health, our circumstances, we still have choices. And every day offers us a quiet chance to become the kind of person we respect. You see, real character isn't about the life you planned. It's about the life you build when things didn't go according to plan. It's in how you treat the caregiver who helps you with groceries. It's in whether you smile at the nervous young nurse who's learning how to find your vein. It's in the tone you use when speaking to your adult children, especially when they don't call as often as you'd like. It's in the way you offer your stories, not as lectures, but as open hands. And in how you sit with someone else's pain, not to fix it, but simply to say, "You're not alone." Character is also in how you talk to yourself. You've lived long enough to know that life doesn't always reward the good or punish the cruel in obvious ways. But still, you keep choosing kindness. Still, you reach out. Still, you believe in decency. And maybe you don't give yourself enough credit for that. Maybe you've gone through entire seasons of life quietly holding others up, your children, your spouse, your friends, without applause, without being thanked. But that doesn't mean it didn't matter. It mattered deeply, more than you know. And now? Now's the time to offer that same quiet strength to yourself, to forgive the version of you that didn't know better, to make peace with the chapters that didn't end the way you wanted, and to use your remaining pages, not with regret, but with grace. Because the truth is, you are still writing your story, even now. And the people around you, your children, your neighbors, the young folks who help you carry your bags, even the stranger who sees you walking through the park, they're reading you, not the words you say, but the way you move through the world, the way you speak, look, listen, the way you carry your memories, the way you respond when life is too slow or too fast or too loud. You are teaching them, without meaning to, what it looks like to grow old with dignity, what it means to hold sorrow and still smile, what it means to have known disappointment and still offer love. You are proof that character isn't something you're born with. It's something you grow into. Like an old oak tree, shaped by storms, rooted through long winters, branches weathered but strong. You don't need to stand tall anymore. Just standing is enough. Still growing, still reaching for the light. So if you ever find yourself wondering, was I enough? Did I do right by others? Did I live well? I'll say this. If you showed up when it mattered, even quietly, if you helped someone feel seen, even just once, if you chose to be kind when you could have been cruel, if you held your tongue when it would have been easier to lash out, if you admitted fault, tried again, softened instead of hardening, then yes, you lived with character, and you are enough. You've planted seeds you'll never see bloom. But bloom they will, in your children's laughter, in the way your neighbor holds the door open for someone struggling, in the way your words echo gently in someone's heart years after they left your table. So let yourself rest in that. Let it bring you peace. And if you've come this far in life still trying to be a better person, even in small, unseen ways, then you've already succeeded at the only thing that really matters. Because titles fade, money comes and goes, praise gets quieter with time, but the way you made people feel, the warmth you carried, the steadiness you offered, the decency you chose day after day, that lives on. That is your legacy. So today, I simply want to thank you for listening, for showing up, for being the kind of person who still believes in goodness, even in a world that often forgets it. And if something in this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear it. Leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your story, your experience. We grow by listening to one another. And if you know someone who might need these words, send them this video. You never know how much one quiet reminder can mean to someone walking through a hard day. If you found comfort here, I invite you to subscribe. This space is for people like you, people with depth, with stories, with wisdom earned the long way around. And as always, I wish you not just more days, but more meaning in your days, more peace in your heart, more kindness in your words, and more people around you who see your character and are better for it. Take care of yourself and keep shining quietly like only you can.